Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for LeanScaper's live Q&A. My name is Kristen Kiley. I am the Chief Customer Experience Officer here at LeanScaper. And of course, I'm joined by Mark Bradley, who needs no introduction. With that started, what we'll do is we'll jump into our first question. So, Mark, what are your three top objectives if you are running a company that is cash strapped?
Three top objectives that's cash strapped. That's always difficult. If I'm sure it's a seasonal cash issue, I'll just assume that. Just being February, I think it's only natural, particularly businesses that are in winter areas that don't do snow. Typically, winter can be a little difficult. Generally, the three things that I'll always recommend. Number one, try not to overinvest in equipment using cash. I think one of the things I see causing a lot of cash flow problems, particularly with earlier stage companies or faster growing companies kind of transitioning from 1 to 3 million or 3 to 10 million. What I see is people taking a lot of the profit from this year and actually putting it into equipment. Now, the truth is, equipment is always depreciating. And so taking the cash out of the business and putting it into a depreciating asset is probably just not a good idea at any stage. Naturally, when we start up, we go out and buy our tools for cash because we don't have a lot of access to credit and often don't have a lot of capital, just sitting around. So we tend to take our profits and buy equipment. And I think it becomes a bit of a habit, but the truth is we're probably better either taking a loan or using leasing. I really like leasing because it keeps the debt off the financial statements and makes it much easier to then go borrow money from a bank for a line of credit. And so that kind of brings me into my second objective. Number one, don't take too much of your cash and put it into equipment. Number two, try to save as much of your available debt to equity ratio or your lending bandwidth for a line of credit, and try to work with the bank as early as possible to establish a line of credit. Whether you need it or not, it's just a great thing to have in place. And I think oftentimes when companies need money, it's not a good time to go ask for it. And so it's generally always wise to ask for the money before you need it. Number three is really collecting fast and acting upon early discounts for project bookings and whatnot. And so often, if you are a little tight on cash this time of year, getting your spring projects booked and taking some deposits, you're going to dip into a little bit of your cash that you're going to be earning later. So you're kind of getting some of your profit early, so to speak, when you take deposits. But obviously, don't really recommend doing this at scale. You could find that you're spending far too much money before the season starts and creating another problem later. But it is a good way to tap into some of the cash to get the season up and running efficiently and invest in some of the things that you need to be doing now to be ready for the spring. So those three are really wise, I think, to look at. Number one, don't overspend on equipment throughout the season. Try to leverage as much as possible to conserve cash. Then definitely look at maximizing the line of credit. And three, try to get paid as quickly as possible on outstanding receivables. I think using credit card payments is the best way to do that. And then take deposits on projects as early as possible as well. Short of that, if you're really in a pinch, one thing that I've helped a few people do over the years is look at their existing fleet, potentially sell off some of the older equipment that is paid for, turn that into cash, and then lease some newer equipment. You end up with a much better, much more reliable fleet, and you're putting your cash to work in the day-to-day cash flow. So hopefully those ideas help. With the limited context of the question, that's about as deep as I could go. There's other things to look at. Feel free to reach out in the LeanScaper community following this. I'll be in there for an hour after this each week. So if you've got more detailed questions, post them there or hit me up with a DM on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to go a little bit deeper with more context.
Great insight, especially at this time of year. We've got a question here from True Star. It says, we are on the verge of 2 million and are wanting to aggressively market for the year. Where do you see marketing being the most effective in 2025 for design build?
For design build. Okay, great. Design build, personally, I think that relationships bring the best projects for design build companies. So it's great to have a really strong website. It's very important to have a really active social media account. Instagram, I think, for design build companies is fantastic. Facebook works well as well. And obviously you can link those accounts. Beyond the obvious websites and social media, partnerships are really where I grew my design build company and where I really see most of the market leaders really growing. And that means tapping into relationships with luxury real estate agents, luxury home builders, architects that design luxury homes, landscape architects that are doing luxury projects regularly. Other trades also that might be really working with luxury homeowners. As you start to do more and more projects, typically you come across other trades that might be working on the luxury homes in your area, really connecting with them, particularly trades that get in a little bit earlier, often electrical and plumbers, carpenters, concrete contractors tend to be at the site a lot earlier than landscapers. And just staying in touch with those people, I used to, often take all the other trades to hockey games. I'd buy a box, I'd bring a group of contractors to a game, and we'd just be talking about all of the big projects that are coming up. And often, at one hockey game, I'd find out about 6 or 7 really large scale design build opportunities. And it was incredible to see just how much we could drive that way. Other things that I would really highly recommend, particularly design build residential or even high-end maintenance residential, is direct mail. I think direct mail is far from dead. I think it's just how you do it. I think there's too many people thinking they're going to print up a door knocker or a door hanger and hang it and get business. I just don't think that works. What does work is getting really specific about building a portfolio, either a book or a very extensive brochure. Personally, I printed up some actual books and we distributed those books in the right neighborhoods. We put them in big envelopes. We addressed them to the homeowner, very heavy package. We found that we had exceptional return on that investment. For $40,000 investment in printing these books and having them delivered yielded over $20 million worth of work in the first year. So direct mail in the target neighborhoods, but make sure that it's really a portfolio that you're handing out with a really clear description of your design process, your sales process, your follow-up, your customer service, and really tell the story of 3 to 5 projects that look and feel like the houses in that neighborhood. But I can't say enough about direct mail. For some other really in-depth playbooks that worked for me that built tens and tens of millions of dollars in revenue, definitely if you can make it to Nashville, March 3rd to 7th, the first 2.5 days is all revenue, and I'm going to unpack at least a dozen playbooks that will really help you grow landscape maintenance, whether it's residential or commercial, design build or bid build, and snow. So I'm going to really unpack some playbooks with a lot of detail over those 2.5 days and dovetail those playbooks into a sales process that you can run in your company, whether you're an owner operator or you've got a whole team of salespeople, to really make sure that sales becomes a priority and becomes really consistent, something that you kind of can take the lumpiness out of your sales cycle.
Thanks for that, Mark. Joshua Owens was actually wondering if you could elaborate a little further on some marketing tactics specifically for maintenance. I know you kind of touched on that with the high-end residential, and also snow and ice.
For maintenance, very similar to what I just described. direct mail, in my opinion, done properly, is actually going to yield higher results than almost anything else. Not many people are doing it or doing it really well. You know, sending out flyers and door hangers does get leads. We all know that. But I think the type of leads that you get from those tactics are not necessarily the best leads. And if you want to be the market leader, you have to find a way to attract the absolute best leads. The two major leading indicators of success in landscape are your ability to attract growth-minded employees and your ability to attract the absolute best revenue or the best customers in the market. And when you think about it, in order to get really laser focused on doing that in residential landscape maintenance, you have to find the neighborhood that you want to work in and be very clear on your ICP or your ideal customer profile. And so once you've done that, if you craft a brochure that describes exactly what you do and how you do it and what makes you so much different than everybody else in the market that they should work with you, if your value proposition is dialed in and that value proposition resonates really well with your ideal customer, then you build this brochure that tells this story, that creates a pathway for your customer to jump on. Once they're on that pathway and they start to look through this brochure that's been hand delivered, something like really meaty and meaningful, they're more likely to engage with you. And then I think the way that you go and sell those type of customers really dictates whether or not you're going to convert those leads. Again, I'll go really deep into that playbook, into that whole conversion tactic, and really explain that sales process over 2.5 days. It's not something I can speak to this quickly, but what that means is developing an ideal customer profile, understanding their pain points, their needs, their desires, super clear, and then really truly developing a value proposition that speaks to those needs, and then creating ad copy, whether it's a brochure or even a digital ad or copy that goes on your website, that really grabs their attention and explains to them how you solve their problems better than everybody else. And so that direct mail opportunity, I think, is just better than anything else because you're actually having that delivered right to the perfect house in the perfect neighborhood. You know, if you're surveying houses that are $1 million and up, or 2 million and up, or 5 million and up, you get to choose exactly where that piece of ad copy goes. And if it's big and heavy in a big envelope addressed to the homeowner, it will get opened. And if the front cover of that is a good call to action, something that's a little bit meatier and designed to really capture attention and get them to open that brochure, and then there's a story in there that looks and feels like them, and it's solving the problem that they're likely to have, then I think you're going to win. And in residential high-end landscape maintenance, we have to remember we're dealing with really busy homeowners who want the nicest property on the street, and they don't have any time to do all of this work, but they still want their property to be the nicest. And so we have to speak to those needs. They're busy. They want a beautiful property. So tell the story of how you help busy people obtain the nicest property on the street, and you're well on your way. But again, we'll go deep into this in the Revenue Accelerator, March 3rd to 5th in Nashville.
Thanks for that, Mark. We are going to pivot a little bit here. So the next question is from Zach Brown. It says, I am trying to determine how to meet my sales goal with labor. If my revenue per man hour is high for the market, I can add a position which increases the amount of labor hours, which decreases revenue per man hour for the requirement. I want to ensure the company can pay for the added labor. Is the profit loss number in the budget the only thing I need to mind to ensure the business can support the added position?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I got it exactly right, but I'm going to answer, and whoever's there can maybe throw a follow-up if I don't quite get it right. Your crew sizes directly dictate your profitability. In landscape, almost every time that I sit down with a landscape company, whether it's an install or a maintenance company, the first thing that I usually ask is crew size. And the reason that I ask that is most companies have crews that are a little bit too big. And when I see companies operating at 60% efficiency, which means 40% of the day has a lot of, unbilled or waste in the way that things are being done. Often, what it really is the crew sizes are too big. So you have to really think about getting the most productivity out of the every hour worked. And so if three people go out on a maintenance crew and they're working an 8 hour day, that's 24 hours of billable time that we're trying to accomplish. Now, what if two people went out and worked 20 hours? Would they get the same amount of work done as the crew of three? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably actually better off working with two-person crews because you've picked up 4 hours of efficiency. If you did that every day, that's about $400 a day of extra profit that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so that adds up throughout the year. And when it's multiple crews, it really starts to add up. And so I typically try to tell people to really take a close look at crew size in every department and then look at what the impact would be on revenue per hour or profit per day by just simply dividing the total revenue that they're going to produce by the total hours worked. And then just reconsidering if you either tightened up the route and got the properties a little closer together, again, with better marketing and outbound selling using direct mail and other tactics like I just mentioned, or really just kind of taking a close look at equipment and tooling, the resources that you're putting on the crews. Like, are they well trained? Are they actually ready to be supporting a crew leader? Oftentimes, I think we're just adding more bodies, hoping to solve the problem rather than really looking at equipment and training as the big opportunities to get more productivity. And I think equipment and training in most cases will allow us to drop one person on a crew, whether it's a 4-person crew going down to 3 or a 3-person crew going down to 2. I think, this day and age, we're always dealing with a workforce shortage, and we should be really looking at using the best technology available and then really training our people a little bit more before putting them to work so that they can work a little bit more efficiently.
Excellent. I don't see a follow-up from Zach at this time, so I think you got it. Let's go to Matt Faulkner next. How do you feel about using stock images in advertising compared to photos taken by the company? If the audience recognizes stock images, do you think it diminishes the brand's authenticity or appeal?
Yeah, I mean, I always try to say, like, ideally get your own photography. If you need to use some stock photography to fill a gap, I think that's fine. But generally speaking, you can get a really good photographer to come out and spend a day or two with your crew each year to kind of refresh a library. And I think that's a great investment to just put it in the budget. When you put it in the budget, your customers are paying for it. And ultimately, you're building the brand asset library over a period of time so that you can just slowly expand that library and utilize those pictures or videos wherever needed. But if you don't have the library and you need to use some stock photos, that's better than not having an online presence at all. So I would definitely go ahead and build using some stock photography with the plan to go ahead and replace those at a future date with something that's a little bit more customized to your own company.
Thanks, Mark. We've got a lot of marketing questions today. One from Ian. Love the direct mail ideas. What are your thoughts on Google AdWords?
Yeah, I think Google AdWords are great for certain segments in landscape. For design build, I just personally, it depends on the size of projects you're really chasing, but I don't think that people are as likely to find design build contractors using Google Ads as they are, maybe landscape maintenance, for example, or turf care or irrigation service or a tree company. I think there's just different segments where people are most likely to go on Google, check out the reviews, and make a hire. I think with design build projects that are starting to really push up in budget value, and where I mean like 50,000 and up, I think people tend to rely on referrals from friends, from other experts, trusted advisors like home builders, architects, landscape architects, even luxury real estate agents. That's why I think those partnerships are so important. I think the biggest and best projects in every market actually come through those type of relationships rather than through Google Ads. That said, I think there's a lot of work to capture using Google Ads in that sort of $10 to $50,000 market. And let's be honest, there's lots of people that are going to log in and start snooping around for pools or luxury backyards and find a Google result and end up on your website. And so the one thing I will say is some big projects do come through Google. Just always remember before investing heavy in Google Ads, you have to really optimize the website experience because you're paying for an ad for them to get a first impression. The first impression is actually going to happen on your website. And if they land on your website and it doesn't speak to their ICP, to them as your ideal customer, and if it doesn't really explain your value proposition immediately, then they're likely to keep looking. It's just a failed launch. And so I think what happens, I see a lot of landscapers paying for Google Ads and not really getting very good results. But then you take a look at the website and it's really not the ideal first step after seeing that ad. So I'm just, I always caution, it's a great tactic. It does work. It's relatively inexpensive. If you're spending $100 or $200 for a conversion on a $50,000 project, that's really not much. But the thing is you're not going to get good conversions unless you've got a really dialed sales process and an incredible website that drives those conversions.
Hey, Mark, while we're on the topic of websites, we did have a question from our community recently. Chatbots on the website, can they be effective at delivering an experience that isn't too impersonal?
Yeah, absolutely. I think chatbots, are definitely going to be the norm. I don't think for long people are going to be making phone calls or sending emails. I think we're going to all get very comfortable dealing with chatbots over the next few years as they get better and better. I think, testing these things regularly in the business we're in, I can say over the last year, chatbots have come a long, long way. Obviously, with the modernization of AI, the chatbots are drawing from a much, much bigger pool of language models than they ever have in the past. So they're just incredible. And so I think what you're going to find is everybody's going to have a chatbot on the front end of the website. It's going to speak to, again, your ICP, your customer profiles. You're going to make sure that those chatbots understand what your service offering is. That it's going to answer the common questions, create a very simple conversation, but very quickly direct somebody to an online meeting. And so my big suggestion, if you are programming a chatbot, try to train it with as much information as possible, and then make sure that it's pointing at a meeting booker with your sales team that will immediately generate a meeting at a time that's convenient to them to really get on and do your first discovery call, 15 to 20 minutes ideally. Do that discovery call over Zoom. That's an opportunity for you to get to know them and move forward that way. That's more for an install or an ongoing maintenance contract. If you're looking at turf contracts where it's fertilization and weed control, you may want to be looking at putting a pricing mechanism with that chatbot so that people can get a budget price right there rather than trying to convert to a discovery meeting. So again, I hate to keep saying this, but first week of March, 3rd to 5th, the revenue growth intensive. We're going to go into detail about this and really talk about how to automate the front end of websites to really drive those conversions and how to kind of shape those tactics based on the ICP and the service offering that you have, because it's not really one formula fits all with marketing. It really does depend on who your customer is and what your service offerings are. And so it's hard for me to give one answer. But definitely, I think chatbots are here to stay, and it's an area to invest in here in 25 for every company, regardless of what that service offering and ICP looks like in your company.
Excellent. One more question on AI specifically from Scott Furman. He mentioned he's been struggling a little bit to get into ChatGPT. Could you give like a couple brief pointers on how you would utilize ChatGPT within a landscape business?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. Scott, you threw a doozy at me. That's not that's a hard one to answer really quickly. ChatGPT can be used in just about every area of your business at this point. I think it's highly underutilized. I think the early adopters are seeing some pretty incredible opportunities, but everything from the way you craft emails, the way you craft proposals, the advertising copy that you put on your website, email drip campaigns to promote your spring services or renewals. Maybe if you're building newsletters, it'll help you build the content there. When it comes to just day-to-day questions that you might have, just asking ChatGPT the questions that you would traditionally have been maybe putting into Google, you're going to get much better answers with much better data sets from a much wider pool. I think with a lot greater truth, I will say, coming out of ChatGPT than a Google search. Obviously Google's serving up results based on many different factors, where ChatGPT is more likely to be serving up the greater truth from a broader data set. So many ways to use ChatGPT in the business right now. It's the list is endless. But once you get in there working using ChatGPT just to help with some of the basics, like I mentioned off the start, more ideas will come your way, and you'll definitely start to come up with ways to really utilize it to become more efficient in the way that you write SOPs, or the way that you develop project plans, or the way that you write proposals for customers for very specific tasks that maybe you haven't done before. I think there's just a wealth of ways to use it.
That's great. Thanks. We're going to pivot to some people questions next. The first one is from Austin Roth, and it says, what should your in-person expectations be for a remote director, manager, salesperson?
Yeah, really good question. I think as everybody knows that the world is getting more and more remote all the time, I always kind of felt like the landscape business has been remote almost like forever, right? Our crews come in, they hop in a truck, they take off, and we're kind of a remote company. And so the idea behind of being really concerned about having everybody work in the office who do supporting activities, whether it's sales or account management or administrative duties, I think is kind of crazy, in the sense that, hey, we trust our field workers to go out, which is our by far our biggest expense. Why don't we kind of just do the same with some of our admin people? Now, the obvious answer is just a lack of systemization. And I really had to deal with this at LMN when we went fully remote due to COVID. I remember feeling, because prior to that, there was no remote. And I remember feeling like kind of lost for a minute. What are we going to do? Now, when you think about a director position in your company, ask yourself, what are the goals that this director has for the coming year? Are those goals clear? Do they really roll up to the company? Are they really well connected? Now, the balanced scorecard is going to help you do this. Now, if that person has a scoreboard and they've got supporting initiatives for their goals, and you know what they're working on, and those are SMART goals that have dates and times for all of these goals to be completed. And if you have a recurring meeting cadence, which again, we've released one recently through LeanScaper. If your company has a recurring meetings for the leadership team, for sales, for operations, for projects, for the maintenance division, if you have these meetings happening every week, then I would really strongly advise either doing those in person or over Zoom, either way. But what you're reflecting on in those meetings is that you start every meeting with the metrics, the targets, and then you look at the actuals, and then you look at all of the SMART goals that have been created with the timelines, and you talk about how those projects or initiatives are trending, if they're improvement initiatives or if it's an actual project for a client. We're just talking about the actual ins and outs of those projects or initiatives. And then, as if it's sales, for example, we're talking about sales pipeline health versus closed deals. We're really looking at the metrics for that specific position. And again, I think working remote is completely doable if you've got the meeting cadence, SMART goals, and a really strong agenda for those meetings. That would be my advice. And never try to go fully remote. Always having some in-person time. I think whether that's monthly or quarterly. Leadership team meetings, and then having monthly at the very minimum, if not bi-weekly team meetings for sales, ops, and whatnot. I think you can kind of get that hybrid approach in place pretty quick, which quite honestly is needed in landscape companies anyway, because typically when you start opening up your second and third and fourth location, you have to have a remote way of doing business and getting everybody on the same page, or you end up with branches that have silos and they're all working differently, which I think is really damaging to the business. And so the faster you move to going online and creating that recurring meeting cadence that everybody aligns to, whether it's one branch, 3 or 10, the better, because I think you can drive your improvements a lot faster with that recurring meeting cadence tied again to the metrics and the SMART goals that support those metrics.
Great, thank you. Kind of sticking with the subject of company alignment, we have a question here from Steve Smith. It says, we recently, this winter season, have finally created a company vision statement for the future. Along with establishing a list of 10 core values we believe in and need to fully embrace to be the company and area leader we have been for 17 years, these are in addition to a mission statement we had since inception. It appears that some otherwise very good staff members with tenure are reluctant to adopt. How do you address that? We may have to replace some with fresh minds if they can't agree as a team this is the direction we need to go. We are currently setting up everything to scale this from 2 million to 10 million in 3 to 4 years. Full portfolio, design, build, maintenance, snow, lawn care, and tree service.
Okay, so here's my advice. Mission needs to be something that gets revisited each year. I'm not saying to change it every year, just revisit it each year. Now, the vision and the mission go hand in hand. And so I really think the fact that you've created the vision now is probably scared a few people. If you're first time releasing a vision that takes the company from 2 to 10 million, the people that are around you may be afraid by that vision. And so as a leader, it's up to you to explain how that vision becomes a reality. And so my recommendation here is get that vision really clear and explain to everybody that what you're doing here is beginning with the end in mind by creating the vision. Like, start by truly explaining to them that what this vision is designed to do is help them understand exactly where you'd like to go over the next 5 to 10 years, and explain that the reason you're creating this is to create more opportunity for everybody in the business. And then just remember that everybody who works with you, their mission is never going to be the company mission. Their vision in life is to support themselves and support their families. And we all share that mission. My mission is the same. I've built many companies, and every time my mission is actually the same at its core. It's to support myself and support my family. And as I build great companies, my mission changes. The company mission turns into one where I'm trying to create prosperity for all of my customers and all of my employees. And so we have to remember that every person at their core has a mission. And what we're trying to do is connect their mission, their personal mission of providing for their families, to the company mission. And so this long-term vision that you've created, it's really important that you explain to them that you've created this long-term vision so that you can serve your community and do what you do as a landscaper. But more importantly, you're trying to build a company that's very successful in doing the right thing every day for its customers. But the true supporting mission is to actually provide a great opportunity for every employee in the company to continue growing and serving their individual missions. And this way you connect their mission with your company vision. And I think sometimes this really helps get people behind you rather than, them kind of maybe off in the corners feeling a little bit stressed out by your vision. And once they're clear that that is where we're headed, you creating a really good mission statement that outlines what the company mission is makes a big difference. And that might need a little update. And there again, there's a great opportunity to use ChatGPT. I feel like it does a fantastic job at doing this, but make sure that your mission is really impact driven, really purposeful, and it really helps your employees understand what it is that you're trying to do and who you're trying to help. I think the biggest thing that I see that most landscapers or business people in general miss is making sure that the vision and the mission explain clearly who you're trying to help. And you should be trying to help your customers and your employees. And when you get really good at writing a mission that explains how you help your customers and your employees, then you get really good at communicating to the world why your company exists and how that vision that's out in the future 5 to 10 years becomes a reality. Hopefully that helps a little bit. My advice would be not to clear house, because they don't understand or buy in, but to talk about that mission and vision constantly to the point where you almost become annoying. And when you do that over and over and over again, people around you start to understand your why. And if they really believe in your why, then they'll stay with you. And if they don't, they're going to leave on their own. And I think that that's a healthy thing. And so I wouldn't clear house. I would just talk about that mission endlessly and let people decide whether or not they want to be a part of it. But definitely try to help them create their own vision for their life and their own mission, and then let them have their own and see that if they help the company, their own personal mission and vision become a reality as a byproduct of being part of a great company that's working together to create prosperity for the community and for the people in the company. Oh, one more thing. 10 core values. Nobody will remember 10 core values. I'm a big believer in creating a core four. Create 4 core values that can really truly be something that you hang your hat on and everybody will remember them. If you try to get 10, you're going to have to create a laminated wallet version for everybody to pull out and read every time they want to refer to them. I just feel like it's too much to remember. There should be 4 words with short statements that support each that can really give you and your team something to rally around. So core 4 on the values, and then really make sure that that mission and vision get talked about every single time you meet with your staff to the point where it becomes annoying.
Thanks, Mark. Great advice. All right, we have our first hand raised. So we've got Kenneth Deemer here from Local Roots. Did you want to unmute and ask away?
Sure thing. Hi, Kristen. Hey, Mark. Good to see you both, and thanks for your time. I'm gonna jump back to the sales side for just 1 second. One of my biggest goals this year has been I've thought of data as a leader for a long time as something that kind of filters up to me. I make my decisions and then get it back to the team. And that's something I'm really trying to change this year when it comes to having this data in front of everybody as a tool to help them gather around the mission. So I'm curious to know, talking specifically sales metrics here, what would you say would be one sales metric that is really overrated? And then maybe what's one we could focus on instead? What would you say has been a traditionally underrated sales metric?
I'm going to go to the whiteboard and I'm going to talk about a sales funnel. This is a great question, Ken. Thanks for throwing this one in. So every company has a sales funnel. We're going to call this pipeline. If I've got a $3 million goal sales target for the year, or let's say I'll just use design build. This could be for any department. I'm going to then decide, okay, how many people are rolling up to this goal? If this is one salesperson, it's real easy. If I've got one person in sales, I'm going to just then come up with a monthly target for the whole year, January right on through to December. And that target is closed one business. And so I want to know exactly how much revenue I want to close each month. So I'm going to make this January for now. And I'm just going to say, if it was January and the target for design build sales to support this goal was to book $200,000 worth of work, I'm going to know that my closed target is 200K for January. Now, I should know how much pipeline I need in order to make that happen. And so the important things that we have to remember are pipeline is actual estimated work. It's not just like opportunities. And this is confusing for some people. I like to always say, like, we've got opportunity, and then we have proposed work. Now, sometimes I go into companies and I hear them say, well, no, we've got all kinds of pipeline. We've got these 10 projects coming up that are all worth 300,000 or 200,000. And I always ask the next question is, how many of those are actually designed and proposed? And the number drops exponentially. And so there's a big conversion rate that needs to be talked about right here, is like how much of the opportunity is being converted to proposed. And then how fast is it actually being converted? Like, are you sitting on your opportunities too long? Is it 60 days before you put a proposal out, or is it 30 days? Now, if it were design build, I'm trying to shorten that proposal time to 30 days. I want to get, at the very least, a budget proposal in front of somebody within 30 days of that first meeting, if not sooner. But I don't want it taking 60 or 90 days. And if we're backlogged on design, I still want to get budget proposals out so that we get the business booked. And what I'm saying here is, if I've got $1 million in opportunity pipeline, tell it like I've got $1 million worth of jobs that are coming my way, that's just opportunities. Now, once I've put proposals in front of them and I've gone through the proposals, now I've got proposed pipeline. Maybe that million drops to 500,000. And so I've got 500,000 in open proposals out. Now there's another conversion rate, right? If I go through to negotiating, I say, okay, now I'm working these proposals into a contract. I've got second meetings. Maybe I've got permits approval, or I've got design contracts that are signed, sealed, and delivered with a budget allocation for a project. However you're doing things, that negotiating phase, if I've got 300,000 that I've moved through to negotiating, then I'm likely to hit my $200,000. But I need to know what my typical conversion rates are from each stage. So if opportunities are converting to proposals at 50%, that's a conversion rate. I've got $1 million worth of opportunities that are converting into proposed at 50%. Now, as I move down to negotiating, there's another conversion rate here that I need to be aware of. And then there's another conversion rate as I go from negotiating down to the contract phase. And then I've got my scheduled work as my final phase. I want to get my scheduled number to be a consistent conversion all the way from the top. And I want to know that conversion. So that would be 20% conversion rate. So from opportunity through to close, if I'm closing at 20%, then I know that I need 1 million in my opportunity pipeline, and I need 500,000 in my proposed pipeline, and 300 in my negotiating pipeline. So what I actually manage the sales team is not the goal, because if they don't hit the goal at the end of the month, what do? It's too late. That's a lagging indicator. All I actually care about day to day, week to week, even month to month, is do we have enough opportunity, and do we have enough proposed, this being most important, proposed? Do I actually have enough proposed work in my pipeline to hit the goal by the end of the month? And so the two big things I look at are the conversion rates and the deal cycle time. If my opportunity pipeline is getting old, then maybe my sales and design team are not really activating fast enough to get into proposed. And if my proposed pipeline is sitting around getting stale, then again, they're not activating to push it through to contract. So the two most important numbers are my conversion rates on revenue. I don't care about the conversion rates on the number of proposals. I care about the dollars. What percentage of the dollars that I propose are getting closed? And then how fast are we doing it? So the cycle time on the sales and the conversion rate from proposed to contracted work is really, or contracted and scheduled, sorry, are really what matters. Does that help you out there, Ken?
He's no longer on
No
the top
longer live?
screen here. I
Okay.
think we lost him. But
All
the
right.
good news is this is recorded and it will be landing in our community today. So if you missed the start, anyone, don't worry, we'll have it in the community for you. We've got another sales question here from Matthew. Matthew says, would developing and creating design build installation packages be a good strategy? For example, $140,000 for the pool install and landscaping for one package.
Yeah, I think packages are great. I think on your website, it's really smart to create like 3 to 4 package type prices where you put a budget range. Here's what you get for 200,000 for a backyard. Here's what you get for 350. Here's what you get for 500,000, or whatever scale you're working in. If it's 20,000, 50,000, and 100,000, just depends on where you're at right now in your journey with your company. But yeah, backyard swimming pool projects, I think packaging the pool, having a good understanding of packages for cabanas, planting, patio, lighting, irrigation. You know, one thing that I used to really like to do when I'd sit down with people in my first meeting was just get a bullet point list of all the things that they would like in the backyard. And I knew what each of those elements would cost. And so I'd be putting those prices down as they're talking. And we're actually building a budget while we're sitting at the dining table as our first step in the sales process. So definitely a big believer in creating that package budget type approach. Get it on the website, get it in those brochures that I was talking about earlier with the direct mail. And what it just becomes a foundation for discussion. It's very unlikely that you'll ever stick to those packages, but it gives people a good understanding of what the budget should be. And again, what you're trying to do as a salesperson is position yourself as a trusted advisor. You know, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. And obviously, they don't like you until you give them some value. And that way to give them value and build trust, I think, in a new relationship is getting to the point really fast and just letting them know approximately what the work costs. And I think your package idea does that. No different than if we walk into a car dealership and the stickers on the window, we at least know whether or not that car is worth looking at, and it keeps us kind of browsing. And so I think having those package prices is that for landscaping.
That's great. Thanks, Mark. We are going to pivot over and talk about standard operating procedures. So we've got a couple questions on this. The first one is from Austin Roth. It says, how do you recommend storing all SOPs, company docs, etc., but not to overwhelm a direct department to where they don't look at them if there are 100?
Yeah, that's a good question. So personally, I'm a big believer in SOPs, but I'm also a big believer in minimizing them. I think sometimes people want to write an SOP for everything that comes to mind. And I just don't think that's that effective. I think SOPs are meant to allow everybody in the company to align to the way it should be done. And so I always try to say that culture in a business is really just a result of the way the leaders made it in the company. So culture can be defined by the way it is. And the way it is the way the owner makes it. And so or the leaders, not just the owner. And so when I really like to think of SOPs as being an extension of that, we're trying to make sure that there's a standardized way of doing things. And so we write SOPs for the big things, could be the morning rollout or the afternoon roll in or the way that we service our equipment or the way that we review the schedule in the company. There's SOPs for the major things in the business. But again, we don't want to over communicate them. We want to use SOPs to train our staff to explain the way that things should be done. Or in some cases, we want to refer to them when we've got corrective action needs if somebody's not following the way. But keeping it to a smaller list and updating the SOPs as things change. When somebody comes up with a better idea or a different way of doing things, update the SOP, bring that out in the next training for that department and roll that out, explain it there, and then it's now in action. Talk about that SOP each time that you've got a variance. If somebody's not following that SOP, talk about it. But aside from that, SOPs don't need to be something that people are accessing every day. And so for storing them, you could create a Google Drive, or it depends if you're using other products, but create a drive that's easily accessible. Give everybody in your company a bookmarked link to to those SOPs from their phone, and everybody's got the SOPs right there at any given time. I think it's an easy way to do it. It worked really well for us. We built a Google file storage that had all of the files that everybody could get at any given time. It's very easy to access and bookmark on a phone using a Google Drive. But again, keep it simple. I think what I see most of the time is people putting out far too many SOPs, and it gets way too overwhelming for people to align to.
Excellent. We've got another question here. This one's from Garrett Higgins. It says, I've built my company with a great team. I am 21 and I'm going into my 4th year. We did 600,000 last year with around 6 to 7 employees. I'm hitting the point of not knowing what to do next in my company. I've been working on SOPs and trying to give my guys more roles. Any suggestions on this sense of not knowing exactly what the best next move is?
Yeah, I mean, like that's why we started LeanScaper. You set me up for a sales pitch, so thank you. Everybody shares that same sentiment. I started my business with a pickup truck and a wheelbarrow at 23, and 15 years later, it was a top 100 company. And so every day from that first day right on through to the top 100, I felt exactly the way you feel right now. What I was always doing was seeking mentorship and advice from people who had already been where I had been. And that's not easy. It's hard to get successful entrepreneurs to slow down and share their playbook. But I always tried to do that, whether it was people in this industry or people in other industries. A lot of what I learned in sales and marketing, for example, came from other industries, but I applied it to LeanScape. Same with Lean. I learned that in my nuclear apprenticeship, and I applied that to LeanScape. Many of my customers over the years became mentors, and I learned a lot from them. But what we're really doing here at LeanScaper is helping create a framework for companies just like you to follow. And so my advice would be this. Get really, really clear on your vision for the company for the next 5 to 10 years, ideally 10 years. Then, beginning with that end in mind, create a supporting mission, create SMART goals every year and every quarter, update those SMART goals so that you're continuously getting closer to that end that you have in mind. And just remember, every quarter, you're going to get a little bit closer. And 10 years from now, you're going to be that company that you want to be. Now, what we do at the Accelerator program is we do a weekly sprint call. I'm kind of like your virtual CEO, coming up with the things that you should be looking at that week in order to continuously improve the company. So the Mastermind Accelerator program would be my number one recommendation for a company your size. That's $200 a month. You're going to get 4 hours of my time, one-on-one, like this. You can ask questions, join us for this call each week. There's a ton of SOPs and documents in the library and a whole community of people that I think you could really seek advice from and continue to evolve that plan over time. But definitely starting with a vision for 10 years from now, and then doing what you need to do right now in order to make that happen. And always remember that your company is a reflection of you. And so your leadership is where you always have to be evolving if you want your business to continue to grow. For me, every time my business hit a roadblock or every time I lost really good employees, I had that hard realization that I needed to evolve, that I wasn't the leader that people wanted to follow, and that the business wasn't evolving because I hadn't evolved enough. And so to this day, I'm constantly seeking coaching. I'm constantly trying to evolve as a leader so that I can level up myself up, so that I can lead a better team of people and attract a better team of people to help on the mission that I'm on. Hopefully that helps.
That's great. I know that we have 3 minutes left, and so many of our attendees are probably going to make the jump over to Mike's Budget Mastery workshop. If you didn't intend to attend that workshop, Mike Lizecki is going to be jumping into all things budget for the next 3 hours. I dropped the link in the chat. You're welcome to click there to register and join. Mark, any final words before we talk about Nashville one last time?
You just took the words out of my mouth on Mike's event for the last question. That's a really, really good place to start. If you think about beginning with the end in mind, the first thing that has to happen is you have to create a financial plan to support your plan for the coming year. Now, budgeting is an opportunity to get very strategic about what you're going to do and what you're not going to do in the year ahead. And every successful business in the world starts every year with a budget that clearly outlines how much you can spend on labor, on material, on equipment, on overhead, and how much revenue you're going to have to produce in order to fuel that. So all of the targets that are going to get set on your balanced scorecard come from a budget. And it's really important. If you don't have a budget set for this year and you're on this call, please go to Mike's 3 hours. If you've got some important things that you're working on today elsewhere, try to reschedule them. If you don't have a budget, make sure you're there. If you do have a budget, try to still make it, because I can almost guarantee you that Mike will give you some strategic ideas on how to really get the most out of the budgeting process and really use a budget as a motivational tool to grow the company. We really believe that creating a budget, creating transparency using a budget leads to that organizational alignment that really drives the motivation deep into the company, to the front line, all the way up to the top. So if you can make it, please join. Again, I talked a lot about Nashville throughout. Nashville, the first 2.5 days, I'm going to help you build your own sales process. You're going to leave with your ideal customer profile built out, with your unique selling proposition and your value proposition really clearly defined, a sales pipeline with all of the metrics, your targets for all of the leading indicators like I talked about earlier, and a set of tools that will allow you to manage salespeople more efficiently and allow them to manage themselves more efficiently, so that they really do get that opportunity to become that top salesperson in the industry. So we're going to focus on that for 2.5 days, and then we're going to switch over for the last 2.5 days. This is a full 1 week in Nashville. We're going to then connect that sales process up to an operational system that allows you to really truly get lean, because I'm a huge believer that what we sell dictates our future in operations. If we're not selling to the right customer and selling to our strengths, then our operation inevitably really struggles throughout the year because they're trying to do work that's not ideal in the sense that we don't have the perfect workforce or the perfect equipment. And so we're going to bring those two together and talk about building a lean company over 2.5 days in that operational efficiency workshop. So I'd love to see you all there. The links are open right now for registration. We've got lots of space left. It's our first ever event. We've got some fun things happening in the evenings. The whole LeanScaper team's going to be there. We'd love to have you all join.
Thanks so much, Mark. Apologies if we didn't get to your question. Please know we will start with those next week. Same time, same place. Have a great day, everyone.